BALTIC Brand Talks, podcast about all things creative and trending.
All right, this is Andris Rubins, and you're listening to BALTIC Brand Talks. And today, I have a very special guest, a person that we have been discussing in the agency and BALTIC Brand Forum team for, I think, last 6 months or so, since we were brave enough to vote to CEO and founder of Studio Gilmore. Paddy Gilmore is the guest of our podcast today. Hi,
Hello.
Paddy.
Hiya, you're right.
So just arrived to
Sorry?
Riga. You just arrived to Riga.
Yes, a flying visit, sadly, so it's very short, but it's great to be here.
Yeah, so after the England's loss in finals, you decided to escape the country for a while.
I did. I was heartbroken, I think, to say the least. But it's great to be here. You know, to
come to one of the most depressing places in there.
I wouldn't say that. So far,
that's how Latvians
quite
treat
cheerful.
our own country often.
Yeah,
and I know it's not a depressive place, but sometimes we tend to think like this.
Sure.
So Paddy is a creator of HumorScope. So I think we come back to that, and Paddy is really has launched, I think, one of the kind consultancy, which is Brand Humor Consultancy. Any idea? Is there any similar to this kind of studios, or you are one of a kind globally?
It's interesting. It's a very good question because I've noticed there are some consultancies that are formed by stand-up comics, and I think maybe stand-up comics are a little bit short on work, and they're often working with brands looking at specifically at comedy. That's not what I do. I look at humor, you know, in its purest form, as it were. Also, I come from an advertising background rather than a comedy background.
Yeah.
Which means that I have a really good sense of, you know, brands' needs, you know, and commercial needs and so forth. So at the moment, I think it's just me. But, you know, I'm sure there's other people out there doing similar things.
Yeah, but definitely, when you Google brand humor, I think you will get Paddy Gilmore or Studio Gilmore in one of those top searches, because as we know, if you do something very consistently for a longer period of time, you own it.
Yes.
So congrats on that.
Thank you very much.
One very important question before we keep on regarding your name. I opened your LinkedIn site yesterday and I read some of very nice recommendations about you and partnering you, but some of them were about Paddy and others about Patrick. So I kept asking myself, what happened? I mean, is it another kind of joke or?
No. I think I was Patrick for many years, and then it got to the point where I realized 99% of people were calling me Paddy, and now I think it's just my dad who calls me Patrick.
All right.
So those are that's the reason why.
Is Paddy kind of the sweet form of Patrick in UK?
Is. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want us to kind of use the sweet.
That would be great.
Version of the okay, Paddy.
Sure.
So. What's your background? So you said you started in the agency. Can you shortly talk about what was your role and was the work in agency that you felt the humor is missing, or you really fell in love with humor, or you know where the relationship with the humor started?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I did a master's in history of art when I was about 22, 23. And that's
a couple of years ago.
Exactly. And that's where the whole thing really started.
Right.
So I was looking at conceptual artists and how they use humor in their art practice. So I looked at artists like Yoko Ono, who's obviously famous for being John Lennon's wife.
Yeah.
And she used humor a lot in her work. And so I started to look into it. And then in the 25 years since, you know, in a career in advertising, I was always interested in how humor worked. And I was reading up on it on the side. So I'd be reading about human psychology and human philosophy. And this gave me a really good sense of what it was all about. And then a few years ago, I said to my wife, I think there could be a consultancy offering here. So we kind of discussed it, and I did a lot of research into it.
Yeah.
And I've definitely found that, you know, it's taken off really, really well. You know, brands are interested. And a lot of what I do is, in a way, with one hand, I hold their hand to say it's going to be okay. And on the other hand, I kind of point at the direction they can go in when they're using humor. I mean, the main reason, you know, in the economic reason, if you like, for doing it is that using human advertising does three things. It makes people warm to the advert, it makes people warm to the brand, and most importantly of all, it makes people more likely to buy the product or service.
Yeah.
So there is a really strong commercial reason for brands to use it. And when I talk to brands about this, that's the point where they think, do you know what? This isn't just about jokes. This is about something deeper and really, really, really important for the business.
All right. And I'm sure you know that there has been a lot of talk that humor has gone missing. Humor has left the chat. So they had this discussion in Cannes Festival this year. And we'll be embracing the humor theme in Baltic Brand Forum this year as well. Could you agree? Like, would you agree that humor is absent, or you would see less humor than it has been historically in advertising?
I think there is. Yeah, I think the brand purpose has definitely made itself known, especially over the past decade.
Yeah.
Whether or not that is, if you like, the enemy of humor, I don't know. But I think what can often happen is a brand talks about being authentic and sincere and well-meaning. That's all very well. The only problem with that is that can often make a brand invisible because everyone wants to be well-meaning and sincere and authentic. So this is where humor fundamentally makes a brand stand out. And as you know, one of the key lessons, one of the first lessons we learn in marketing is a brand needs to stand out for people to remember it and go on to buy it.
And being the most authentic brand in category would not do the job.
Exactly. I think there's also something which is you have the product, but you also have the performance.
Yeah.
And often what tends to happen in advertising is we focus in on the product and the product benefits and what are the emotional benefits and so on and so forth. And we forget about the performance. And humor is a great way of bringing performance to a brand. If you take a great product like Bohemian Rhapsody, it's a great, great song. But without Freddie Mercury singing it, it wouldn't be what it is. So it's product and performance. And this is where humor works so well.
So in advertising terms, it's also the craft. You mean the way the content is produced.
Exactly.
Because in today's world, I think performance and performance marketing can often mean this kind of digital media planning.
Yeah, I don't mean it in that sense at all. It's more performance in the sense of entertaining.
Okay.
And if there's one word which I think is missing from so many advertising agencies globally, it's the word entertainment.
All right.
Because when people sit down to watch something on TV and an advert comes on, they're not sitting there because they want to see an advert. They're sitting there because they want to see the latest Netflix hit.
Yeah.
And when the advert comes on, they need to be entertained. Because when they're entertained, they're going to watch to the end and take it on board.
Yeah, I think you would be the best person also to talk about this kind of humor being very nuanced theme and kind of product or topic. And it can be cheesy, witty, outrageous, sarcastic, many more forms, I believe. And we even have these kind of, humor categories as dad jokes. Probably, I know in Latvia we have these Estonian jokes and, where we, friendly smile about, a couple of stereotypes we have about these, neighboring countries and so on. So is there any system method how you kind of decide which type of humor suits these particular brands that you work with?
There is. There's basically three core humor mechanisms. One looks at the cognitive way, the way that we interpret things in our minds mentally. Another one looks at the emotional way that we interpret things. And the third one looks at the social way in which we interpret kind of information and data. And humor works with these three elements. And sometimes two of them form at the same time, and sometimes all three. And so what I do when I'm working with a brand is fundamentally I break down these elements with them. And I show them how they work in adverts. And I basically say, okay, which of these adverts resonates with you and your audience and your proposition?
And is there an easy answer to that?
There isn't an immediate answer, shall we say.
Yeah.
I think so much depends on the product, on the audience, and on the brand. Humor is a very interesting subject because on the face of it can seem quite simple and easy to understand. But once you actually dig deep, it is actually, there is some complexity there. But the thing I do with every client is take them on a journey and take it step by step and say, we're going to do it, one step at a time, so you'll know exactly what's happening when.
Yeah, that's exactly the question I had. Like, how does this brand consulting and humor, how does it actually work? Like, do you take them to stand-up comedy nights? You show them funny ads? You kind of, what's the way that you really kind of, make them understand?
Sure.
And really kind of start using it in every sense of the word.
What I tend to do is I tend to start with a introductory session in which I break down humor into its component parts. I make sure to include lots and lots of funny ads so I can illustrate them with these ads. Because one of the problems with humor is people might talk about someone having a dry sense of humor, and that's good, but that doesn't really mean the same thing to lots of different people. So I basically define the terms. Then on the back of that, I look at their brand problem. Now, some brands have been using humor for many years and they're very happy with it, but they want to explore it a bit more. They want to keep their advertising fresh. So I was working with Tele2 recently, and they want to do exactly that. Other brands are a little bit unsure about humor completely, and they're like, what do we do? What do we write in our brand book?
Where do we start?
Exactly, that's exactly it. So I worked with Epson on a project in which they said exactly that. We're stuck. Can you define, what we should be doing with humor in our communications?
How important is to have people with a great sense of humor working with the brand that wants to embrace humor?
I think it's important to have people who understand humor, and people who understand humor tend to have a good sense of humor. The way I look at it and the way I approach it is by looking at humor science, because there is a science there.
Yeah.
There's a big body of knowledge, and it's expanding every year. And so that's what I bring to brands.
And you mentioned that you've been doing some work in Latvia and Baltics as well with Tele2 and other brands. So how important are those cultural differences when it comes to humor? And have you kind of noticed a very specific Latvian, particular culture or sense of humor here?
There are some cultural differences. I think it's interesting. When I was working with Tele2, we talked about the idea of having a fish skin in your wallet, which would mean you would become rich, I think.
Very, very, serious thing to do around New Year's.
Exactly. So there are always kind of common points of knowledge. Yeah. But equally, there are commonalities between, say, someone in Latvia and someone in Spain or someone in Germany. And what I often do, especially on campaigns that run kind of transnational campaigns, is look at common principles across different geographies.
Yeah, so it's the search for universal kind of insights or universal relatable humor there.
Exactly.
So can you actually learn to be funny? In creative industries, it's often heard that you can train your creative muscle. So if you practice creativity, you can actually become more creative. It's just like your mental, physical health is your creative health. Can you say something similar about your funny health or humorous health?
I think you can. One of the things that I've found, I've presented to lots of different brands over the past few years, and one of the things that struck me is they've often said, I didn't realize how many different types of humor there were. There are so many different types of humor. And this means that a creative might look at these and think, I can specialize in that one. Or I really tap into that type of humor. Yeah. It's a vast universe, and it's a lot of fun exploring it as well.
I think today, if you look at some of those kind of hottest brands globally, they also kind of own their own particular type of humor, like Oatly's type of humor, which is more like a witty copyright, no bullshit texts, almost like a friendly laugh about all the advertising cliches in a milk category we've known before. And there's Liquid Death type of humor who are being crazy and exploring this wild side of or doing the opposite what every other marketing team would kind of allow the agencies to do.
Sure.
And there's Volkswagen type of humor, again, very intelligent, very witty, not loud, but when you get it, it stays with you forever. The kind of lemon type of humor. Do you think brands can own their kind of specific type of personality and humor?
Definitely. I believe that completely. And if you look at Volkswagen, they've been using humor for 60 years. They've been using it hugely effectively. They're worth something like, I think, 65 billion euros, their market cap.
Yeah.
Which shows that humor in their advertising works. It is a really strong commercial factor. If you look at IKEA, they have a very distinctive sense of humor.
Yeah.
So I've got no doubt that a lot of these brands they've got a very strong, sense of humor. They know what they're doing. They've got a very strong humor strategy. And I sometimes say that if I can see like an ideal world at some point in the future, it would be that within the brand book, brands have a humor strategy in that. As well as this is how our logo should be used, or this is our tone of voice. There should be a section on humor.
All right.
That would be great.
But there isn't.
For many brands, there isn't.
Yeah, I think even the audio branding is not yet there. So I think the humor probably is kind of somewhere in the line.
Exactly. Or sometimes there's humor's like, we want to be funny but never cheeky. And that doesn't say anything. That doesn't really help a creative in an advertising agency. You look at that and think, well, what do I do with that? So my feeling is, okay, let's dig a little deeper. Let's show examples. Let's actually show the component parts of how humor works and how we can make it work best for the brand.
All right. So what are some of the most important lessons that you have learned from, consulting the brands on humor, and what are maybe some of the most challenging parts of it? Like, where do brands still kind of struggle?
I think a key thing is to make the humor thematically relevant, which is a fancy way of saying make it relate to the product or service. That is a really, really important lesson. That's the first thing. I think secondly, to really think deeply about the message you're trying to get across. Humor works best when there's a simple message.
Yeah.
If a brand is trying to be too complicated, then it isn't going to work that well. I think sometimes brands are still a bit nervous about using humor.
Yeah.
And one of the things which I do is I give them an idea of safeguards. These might not eliminate all the risks, but they'll definitely minimize the risks.
Because there will always be this one person on Twitter or Facebook who will, hate the joke. Or who will be, how do you say in English, like offended?
Yes. People take offense quite a bit these days. But, the one of the things which I say to brands a lot, and which brands I think are taking on board more and more, is that there are safeguards. There are ways of using humor in which you can use it sensibly and effectively. And that doesn't mean the humor has to be bland. Far from it.
Yeah.
It can be really out there. But it's this is something which we know more and more about. And because humor science is developing so quickly and so rapidly, all these developments are coming into play pretty much immediately.
Yeah. Can you mention some of the your favorite pieces of content that brands have created, either in your supervision or just advertising?
Sure.
Noticed?
By all means. I think within the UK, Ryanair do some fantastic work. They do amazing work on social. During the COVID pandemic, they did some fantastic work satirizing the government. In terms of a long service medal award, Volkswagen would probably win that.
Yeah.
McDonald's as well. They're consistently good. Other names that come to mind, Carlton Lager in Australia do some fantastic stuff. But there's stuff all the time. I saw a fantastic Canal Plus ad the other day. I've been seeing some really funny ads coming out of France recently.
Yeah.
So, and it's great. It's wonderful seeing, brands do, using humor more and more.
So this is also something that you would cover in your weekly newsletters that you constantly produce and publish on Mondays, which I think is fantastic, knowing how dark sometimes Mondays are.
Thank you.
So I think some shining light coming from you is really nice and great. Do you track the responses of those pieces of newsletters that you do, and is the community growing, and how big is it?
Yeah, it's growing. I mean, we're well into the thousands now. I do track the responses, but as much as anything, I see it as two things. On the one hand, it's lovely, that people are, reacting so positively to it. That's great. Yeah. But also for me, it's a way of, teaching people, and I really enjoy writing it, as well as, seeing thousands of people read it.
And I think it's probably also a discipline for you to kind of make sure that you really, look around.
Exactly.
I was doing my blog many years ago, and not very consistently, but I remember how hard it was. When you talk about something, it's easy. When you have to publish something, it gets much more serious, because it's written there and it has to be precise, the facts and everything.
Sure.
Do you consider what I think how many books have been published is basically a long series of blogs compiled?
Yes, yeah.
Can we expect one?
At some point, yes, definitely.
Yeah. I think would be great.
I'd love to.
Be great. I think the books on brand humor definitely something I would consider adding on my shelf. Next to, I think we have 3 books of Volkswagen ads.
Thank you.
Already. Yeah, so maybe some couple of more do's and don'ts for brands that decide, from next morning, next week, we are gonna be one of the most entertaining brands, the most humorous brands. What would be, some of those takeaway thoughts for them?
The first thing I would say is explore the area. Look at as many humorous adverts as possible. It's really good to get a sense of all the different types of humor that are out there. That's really, really important. Second thing I would say is don't just think about jokes. Look at humor as what it is, which is an innate human trait. It's there's no civilization on earth that's been found without humor. So explore it in that sense. And thirdly, make it relevant to the product or service. This is called thematic relevance. That's the fancy way of putting it. But very simply, we've all seen an ad which is trying to be funny, but has no relation at all to what it is they're advertising.
I think every second Super Bowl ad, no?
Exactly. And those ads, well, fundamentally, they're boring to the viewer and they don't work commercially. So, those are the first three pointers I would say.
Yeah, that's great. I think this exploring the types of humor, and probably, listing the ones that you also enjoy as a team, because I think it's pretty important if you feel the humor internally as well in the company.
Yeah.
And then maybe a list of, the jokes, examples that you wouldn't want to, be part of. That sounds pretty great to me. But I mean, still there is common myth that there are, industries, areas, topics that have to be taken seriously. There is no place for humor, like often business to business. I mean, these are professionals, these are CEOs. We can't, afford to be funny here. Social responsibility, projects, employer branding, safety instructions. Even we all know those funny Virgin and other airlines kind of safety instruction videos. Product kind of description, ingredients, and again we know Oatly and innocent Jews that kind of broke those rules. So what would you say to those guys that said this is not the area?
I would say fundamentally that isn't true. There's many examples of B2B advertising using humor and using it very effectively. Volvo have used humor fantastically well with their trucks.
Oh man!
Recently, I saw an advert, a Volvo ad, I think it came out last year, showing two trucks kissing. It was a very, very funny ad. I showed it to my children as well. They loved it. They're not going to buy a Volvo truck, but they thought it was fantastic. What is interesting about humor is that once upon a time, about 20 or 30 years ago, there was a view that humor could only be used in advertising if it was a low-cost, low-consideration product. So beer, sweets, cigarettes, that kind of thing. But as time went on, we now know that humor can be used with higher ticket items. So in America, you've got Geico using humor to advertise insurance. You've got Volkswagen using it to advertise cars that might be I don't know, 30,000 euros. So this is where humor is very much, you know, it can be used in lots of different product areas. And as we're exploring more and more, we can see it's very effective in higher price, higher consideration items.
Even luxury brands? Have you seen funny Ferrari ad? Or
it's interesting because there is this common idea that the luxury is the last place humor can go.
Yeah.
I can't see Tiffany's using humor anytime soon. However, there's one big exception to this, which is Harvey Nichols. And Harvey Nichols in the UK have been using humor for many years, very effectively.
Fashion victims.
Exactly. So this is where, in one sense, no, but in another sense, yes. But yeah, luxury items, that's an interesting area.
The Kenzo dance we film.
Yes.
I mean, that was fantastic.
Yes.
And that was definitely humorous.
Yeah, exactly.
At the same time, I mean, still having this, you know, this kind of glamorous style and the costume and everything was there.
Yes, yeah.
And then the twist of, you know, crazy moves, which made it so distinctive.
Exactly, yeah. And there are exceptions. Jean-Paul Gaultier has used humor in a lot of his ads.
Yeah.
And it's a luxury brand, you know. So, yeah.
So the industries, products, you would agree, okay, this is serious. Or the contexts, like, I mean, the pandemic or you know, the wars, even though the Ukraine, I think, is a great example of still trying to find a space for, you know, humor or ironic kind of jokes about what's happening out there. But of course, it's very sensitive times and context to keep going with entertainment.
Yeah. It is, you're right. But I think often the more serious the subject, the more necessary it is to have humor, just to kind of sweeten the pill.
Yeah.
A great example of this is there's a campaign called Dumb Ways to Die.
Oh, right, yeah. Famous one.
Yeah. Now, that was trying to prevent deaths from people, you know, messing around on railway tracks in Australia. They could have gone with a very serious don't do this campaign. Instead, they made a cartoon, they made a song. They made it entertaining because they realized that if they were going to get people to actually pay attention to the message, it had to be delivered with humor. And so that's what they did.
Yeah, that's a great example. And still, I think a reference for ourselves whenever we have to do the next safety, you know, road safety awareness campaign.
True, yeah.
So we kind of always have the Dumb Ways to Die kind of reminder, hey, it doesn't have to, you know, be bloody and deadly. It can be, you know, funny and still, you know, convey the message. So that's a good one. Yeah. So I think you mentioned already this. There has been a lot of purpose-led brands kind of era. I think last five years or so. And are we moving from purpose-led brands to humor-led brands era, or can they both themes, you know, marry each other and become one? What's your opinion on this?
I don't know. I think that we're finding the limits in brand purpose. I think a lot of brands are finding that now because, you know, it just leads to a kind of general sameness, you know, which obviously isn't good. Whether brands are moving to humor or not, I don't know. I think the introduction of a humor category at Cannes is definitely a very encouraging move. I think there's definitely more discussion of it within the industry. You know, I've found personally, you know, in terms of inquiries and the work that I've been doing, it's definitely been busy. So I think there are some signs there. It could be a bit too early to tell, you know, but in a couple of years' time, we'll probably know more. Yeah.
You're one of the keynote speakers in this year's Baltic Brand Forum this September in Riga, and I'm really proud that and happy that you have agreed to come back to Riga. Obviously, you like the place.
I like it a lot. Thank you.
Can you give us you know, a short teaser on what it's going to be about? The presentation.
So what I'm going to do is the title of my presentation is Why Humor Works with Brands, and it doesn't just work with your mates in the pub. And I'm going to talk about people's reservations about using humor and why so many of them are unfounded. And why fundamentally humor is such a great tool, both commercially and creatively.
Can you expect some examples as well?
Plenty of examples.
That's good.
Yes, definitely.
All right. A couple of questions that we ask every guest in the podcast, and you are no exception to this. So, which brands do you admire? So, what are let's say, a couple of your favorite brands at the time, and why is that?
I admire Carlton Lager in Australia for their real devotion to using humour so well. I really like them.
Maybe some of the best lines, if you can quote.
I think just that fantastic tagline, "Made of beer."
Right.
It's a beer, and the tagline is "Made of beer." I think that is
it's a
superb.
bit like No Bullock's approach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. I think Ryanair, in terms of their consistency, in terms of their kind of social media feeds, that's been fantastic. The Economist ads.
All right.
Are superb.
All right. Yeah.
Really, really good. I like brands that do things consistently, over a long period of time, and really build up, a lot of kind of following that in that way. So those three come to mind. Great
examples. And why I ask that, because these three brands now are shortlisted for next episodes in Baltic Brand Talks.
Great.
If they agree to come and visit. Another question, where do you get the inspiration? Is it podcasts? Is it books? Is it travel? Is it something else that you kind of reload yourself with, new views and new insights?
Yeah, I just tend to find that my radar's always on for like different things. It could be a newspaper article. It could be a social post, whatever it might be. Recently, I saw a Guardian newspaper and newspaper headline, which was saying that has India lost its sense of humour?
Oh, right.
And it's talking about one of the biggest countries in the world with a huge population. And I thought, okay, now that is going to make me write something, and so I did. So there's inspiration to be found everywhere.
So you have this special, sense of hearing or vision whenever you see or hear the word humor. That's straight on.
I like to. I mean, I kind of take my work home a bit too much with me, but it's I really love what I do, and that that I hope that comes across.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And probably on just on the same kind of note, having found your thing that you love and you are good at, and the world needs it. So what is the goal maybe in the next couple of years? So what is something that you will be proud of being done, or at least inspired or encouraged?
I think to be seen as a specialist within this area. That would it is an honor to be seen.
You are there already. So, but I mean, let's say you are a specialist of humor, because I really believe you are there. So, but looking in the future, so what would the perfect world look like when it moves in the direction which is a bit more entertaining? So.
Sure. I think for me personally, I'm developing some products at the moment.
All right.
Those might include a book, but it'd be great to see those products being used.
Yeah.
That would be great. And I think looking into my crystal ball, say 5-10 years down the line, a view that we can really understand humor and use it in a really healthy and effective way. And it's a great thing. It's great to laugh. It's great to smile. It's great to feel warmth towards a brand. And fundamentally, that's what marketing's all about, really.
All right. I think that's a perfect happy end to our conversation that could be much longer than this, but we respect the audience. I think it's I really appreciate for you coming by in our Riga podcast studio, and we really hope to see you back in Riga Circus, the beautiful venue, in 20th of September for Baltic Brand Talks.
Sounds great. I can't wait. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and see you soon.
Thank you. Sounds great.